I have been chasing belonging all my life and failed in so many environments for a really large, for the bulk of my life, right? Partially because the bulk of my life I've been a marginalized person, not being in a position of power, for example, a student, right? You're not, when you're going through your K through 12 education or even university life, you're not somebody who has a ton of positional power. And so when you experience putting in all you possibly can and still experiencing marginalization and oppression again and again, I think that's a very experiential way of learning that you're not the only ingredient.
Mm.
That you and your bootstraps are not the only ingredient, right?
Mm-hmm.
That the environment makes a big difference. That people holding positional power are a key ingredient, and they need to change for there to be change overall. One place I learned this, I remember I was in 4th grade or 5th grade. We were assigned to read To Kill a Mockingbird. And I grew up in Canada, by the way, so this is Canadian education system. To Kill a Mockingbird was a book that was assigned. My teacher was a white female, and we were asked to do book reports. So the classroom actually wasn't all assigned To Kill a Mockingbird. There were different books, and we were divvied up into groups. And me and 2 other Black students, the only other people of color in the class, everybody else was white. We were the only ones assigned To Kill a Mockingbird. I remember thinking, why did we get this book? Because it's the one book that white people like to think that it's about race,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I remember it wasn't a group project. It was just that the 3 of us were assigned this one book. And so the idea was that like different people are going to write different book reports and you're going to get to see different perspectives. I think that was the objective. And 5 minutes into presenting my book report, she shut me down. She stopped me. She told me that I didn't do the project right, that I failed the opportunity, and that she was disappointed. I remember getting an F and that she told me I needed to redo it. I remember not doing it. I remember thinking to myself, I'm not redoing this project. Even in 4th and 5th grade, I remember saying, I'm going to keep the F. I don't care because there was nothing wrong that I did. I remember she stopped me, and in front of the whole class, I remember she said that I got the book wrong, that I was confusing everybody, and that I would need to redo it and present it. And what made my and I don't remember, this is 4th or 5th grade, right? And so I don't remember how long I presented before she interjected. My memory of it, it was immediate, but I remember it was enough where I had pointed out the racism in the book. I had said that like the book was about a white person, was written by a white woman about a white person and a white girl and her white father who had these white savior complexes. I don't think I was familiar with that terminology. I must have used some other words where their job and focus was to save one Black man, and how the book never talks about the Finch family's complicity in the racism system.
Mm.
I remember in my book report talking about KKK was referred to as a political organization and not a hate group. And when Atticus is accused of being a radical, he compares himself to this political figure. I'm not going to remember his name at the moment, but I remember I had researched and found out that he was a white supremacist. So, like, Atticus had compared himself to a white supremacist to prove he wasn't a radical. And I remember talking about how the book is published in the 60s and it doesn't mention any of the civil unrest that is taking place in the country at that time. It doesn't talk about what the problem is with a Black person being accused of rape and the significance of that. And the word lynch is never used
Mm.
and the weight of that accusation. And I remember when a book report ended with saying, this is not a book about racism. This is a book about white people and their ability to be kind and be moral beings. And not about white people having created the whole system
Right.
to begin with. And I didn't know this at that time, but I remember when she shut that down conversation and said I had to redo it and gave me an F, I realized like I had no recourse
Mm-hmm.
as a 4th grader. I could not go to my immigrant parents and ask them to come and advocate for me. They didn't have the skills. They didn't have the language.
Right.
There were no adults in the system that would have been able to help me. And I realized, I think that moment was like, there's only so much that I can do. There is work they need to do. Like this teacher needs to develop herself to know how to support a person like me. Those kind of experiences happening over and over again, where you realize that there are no adults competent to care for you or to understand you or your experience. I think the other experience I would just point to in my life was my parents moved back and forth between Pakistan and Canada. So up to my 20s, I never got to live in one culture long enough where I could be like even have the semblance of fitting in.
Mhm.
And when you repeatedly don't belong, don't although fitting in is not the same as thing as belonging, but, like, I'm using them synonymously at the moment. But when you repeatedly don't belong, and also when you change cultural contexts significantly, right? So in 2nd grade, I went from using paper and fountain pens and, like, ballpoint ink pens in Toronto, Canada, to moving to Pakistan where we used a wood tablet with reed pens where we had to mix our ink the day of. So like technology experiences that were like vastly different and how schooling was done. Like I think like my experiences of experiencing systems that felt like they were from drastically different worlds and times has given me, I think, the context and the ingredients to realize that we have to think outside the box.
Mhm.
We have to radically imagine different ways of being to create new systems and to create different systems.